I must start the show here, Brady Quinn. I got to be honest with you, I'm a little confused, okay, because I thought that, I try and pride myself on preparation. I know you do as well, too, and I feel like an idiot because I'm looking everywhere here, and I'm trying to, where is this? Because I'm trying. Yeah, none of my notes say that Atlanta got a first-round pick that was on the table for Julio Jones. So I'm just trying to, where's this? What happened to that first-round pick that was on the table that we were told about, Brady Quinn, that the Atlanta Falcons were going to get for Julio Jones? What happened to that first-round pick? I'm trying to find it here. I can't seem to find it.
It's kind of like that tooth that my oldest daughter lost. It was under a pillow, then it disappeared.
Right.
The tooth fairy took it. That's essentially where it went. Yeah.
Oh, man. Look, they end up getting what was it, a second and then a fourth is one of the reports that was out there. But nonetheless, regardless of what they got in return, it wasn't the first-round pick. It wasn't the future first-round pick that was on the table. This just came down to Tennessee giving them probably the best offer they could possibly get, and Atlanta just realized, all right, we've held out long enough. We can't do better than whatever this offer is, and so now Julio Jones is a Tennessee Titan, and there's many different angles of this story outside of just the ball busting on the ridiculous reports that were out last week.
Wait, here's the reality. They're getting a 32-year-old wide receiver who hasn't played 2 full seasons in a couple of years. Now, granted, he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, statistically speaking, he's been as effective as any wide receiver that's played the game. But the question becomes twofold. How much more does he have left in the tank? And then I think he's going to want a new contract. It might not be now. And Tennessee is going to take over the entirety of what his contract is this year. Whereas, sometimes when a team makes a trade, in order to trade that player, yes, there's an exchange of picks, but sometimes they'll say, you know what, the team that's trading him away will pay a portion of that contract. And they'll do that as an act of, good faith, to make the deal happen, in particular for the player. So that didn't happen in this case, all right? Tennessee's picked up the tab. They basically walked in and said, nope, we're going to go ahead and pay for dinner too. We're going to accept the second-round draft pick in next year's draft. And then we've got, I believe it was a 5th and a 6th, if I'm not mistaken. That's for the 2023 draft. And so as I told you, when that's a couple drafts away, it's really looked at like a 6th and a 7th in 2022, since that's the next draft. 2023 is still a couple years away. So really not the value that I think they were preaching or, touting about. And what's even more dire about it, Jonas, is Atlanta had to work with a team that they probably had the best relations with in the Tennessee Titans. Yeah. Arthur Smith, their head coach in Atlanta, had been with the Tennessee Titans for 10 years. So he's got a strong relationship with the people in the front office, with ownership there, and I'm sure that played the biggest role in this deal getting done when it got done. Because as I've said to you before, this thing, if Atlanta wanted to maximize their return for Julio Jones, should have happened before the draft. 100%. Once you draft someone's replacement, that's it. You lose all your leverage. And so Atlanta had to take the best of what they could get, and they did it with their buddies or their friends up in Tennessee.
Yeah, I actually was just thinking about that. I wonder what I wonder if you could go back. I wonder what the best offer actually was, because I don't think that this was the best offer. I think there was probably other offers that were on the table, or at least discussions about what we'd be willing to do in order for Julio Jones. And I just wonder what Atlanta could have had they gotten this done before the draft as opposed to what they got now. That I'd be fascinated to know. And also, I just wonder if this came down to there were teams having discussions with them about making a move for Julio Jones, and then maybe those teams, because Atlanta wasn't pulling the trigger, decided, all right, we're just going to address our needs at wide receiver in the draft, or we're going to handle it elsewhere, and then those offers fell off the table. I wonder how many teams were actually having conversations with the Atlanta Falcons in the past week or so about Julio Jones, because I just don't get the feeling the market was as robust as a lot of people wanted to make it out to be.
Maybe it wasn't. Although, again, before the draft, I think you could look at a lot of teams that took wide receivers in the first round and said, I think for the short term at least, they would rather go with what is somewhat of a proven commodity, even though, again, Julio failed to stay healthy last year. But, the more you talk to people about that, the more it was almost like, once he started having some issues, he just kind of threw in the towel in the season and said, I'm going to stay away. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was, a hamstring injury?
Yeah, that hamstring just kept popping up at weird times.
Well, it was a high one. When it's a high hamstring injury, that can last for a while, right? Low, you can come back in a few weeks. If it's high up towards that gluteus maximus, that thing can take a while. But
he seemed like he wasn't all that interested at times getting back out there late in the year.
Right. And then his conversation with Shannon Sharp made it seem like he had gone ahead and just put the nail in the coffin on that a while ago. But look at the Ravens, for example. They take Rashad Bateman. He's a wide receiver out of Minnesota, number 27 overall. That's a spot where maybe Baltimore called up Atlanta and said, hey, we've got the number 27 first-round pick. What do you think?
Yeah.
And Atlanta might have misplayed it thinking, well, we've got someone who's willing to give us a 2022 first-rounder that we think is going to be a higher first-round pick. So, we're going to go with that. Baltimore also had a 31st first-round pick this year. So, maybe that was on the table. I have no idea, but probably once they took Bateman, that offer goes away, right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine before the draft, if you started lining up teams who ended up taking first-round draft picks at wide receiver, they started kind of slowly saying, okay, this is our deadline. If you don't want to trade them by now, we're going to go into the draft, and whatever happens, in the draft, we're going to have to move forward with our roster. And I would imagine that's what happened. A lot of those teams end up saying, okay, we're out of it. I mean, think about the New York Giants. The Giants traded back. And there was this whole thing about David Gettleman and what they wanted to get in the first round of the draft. They traded back so far, they ended up taking Kadarius Toney, completely different wide receiver. But I also wonder if Atlanta didn't, have a conversation with them and say, hey, we know you're looking for a wide receiver. We'll take that first-round pick, and we'll give you Julio Jones for it. A veteran guy. But, again, none of that stuff ended up happening. So I think it might have been a handful of teams, but this all had to have occurred around the draft, before the draft.
And then also, I do you get this feel, because I think it was a tweet that was sent out, and I forget who I saw it from, but they were trying to sort of compliment the Atlanta Falcons for doing the deal with Tennessee, just showing, hey, they did this the right way. Atlanta did him a solid. They traded him to Tennessee, and they wanted to make sure that he ended up in a good place with a winning organization. And there was sort of that messaging that was out there. What a bunch of crap! If Atlanta got an offer on the table from Tijuana, they would have traded him to Tijuana. They don't give a crap where he ended up. The relationship was scarred at the end, and this idea that Atlanta's trying to get the messaging out there that, hey, we take care of our veteran players when they want to get traded, not only do we acquiesce, but we make sure we send them to a good spot. Stop. This was one of the only offers that was on the table, and if there was an offer from one of the worst teams in the league who wanted to make a deal, if that team was even in the market for a wide receiver, they would have done that too. This feels like a new regime who butchered their first major trade, and now they're trying to save face afterwards. What do you think about that?
No. So you're talking about credibility. I think that's what you're talking about, right? It's a new regime in Atlanta, so they're trying to build credibility within the organization.
Yes.
That's why they did right by him. This is the new age of the NFL.
Yes.
My first question would ask you this. Did the Atlanta Falcons need to do that? Like, if the Atlanta Falcons been viewed as a bad organization, or Arthur Blank isn't willing to open up his checkbook and basically write Matt Ryan and Julio Jones blank checks throughout the course of their career? Like, if that was the case, then how are you viewing the Atlanta Falcons? I mean, they're one of the better organizations from any player you talk to that goes and plays there. Now, that doesn't always mean they'll have success, but it's not like they're cheap. They've got great facilities.
Yeah.
They've got a great stadium. They've got a great owner. So that whole narrative is one in which, you almost hear from probably an agent doing a nice puff piece, just to try to, calm things down on the way out. But the truth of the matter is, this has nothing to do with trying to find him a soft landing spot. This has everything to do with the Atlanta Falcons and Arthur Smith exercising all of those relationships he had at Tennessee to be able to get something back for Julio Jones outside of just a second-round pick, which, again, it is a little crazy when you think about the fact that New England traded for Mohamed Sanu.
I know.
Was that a second and a fifth, if I'm not mistaken?
I think so. Yeah, I know it was a second, and I don't remember what the other pick on that was, but yeah, Mohamed Sanu and Julio Jones, and that was, 1 year apart?
Yeah.
I think it was 1 year apart. That's crazy, man.
It's crazy, especially because basically it's a sixth-round pick is the only difference. That is crazy only because one's a Hall of Famer, and the other one, I'm not even – he's a veteran wide receiver in the NFL. I'm not sure you'd put it any other way.